Is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio. This is the DFS Picks and Prediction Show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, where me, Weezy, Luke, and AJ break down the upcoming card from a DFS perspective and give our predictions on the fight as well. And as always, we're going to give our favorite fight to target, our favorite fight to fade, fighter to fade, favorite dog, favorite GPP play, favorite cash play, favorite value play, and our favorite dart throw as well, along with answering any questions you guys have, giving our quick picks, and then we will all four give a lineup at the end, and we're going to see who won last week, and then we'll see who can win this week as well. So we'll start off with Weezy. Weezy, what is up? Are you looking forward to this banger of a card?
Absolutely, man. UFC 266 is just top to bottom, chock full of awesome fights that I can't wait for. We got 6 fighters in the 9,000 range this week. We got it could be either like a stars or scrubs kind of lineup, but there's also a lot of really interesting fights and fighters in that mid-range this week. 14 fight slate, a lot of ways to get different. This is going to be a great card to break down from a DK perspective. Can't wait to do it with you guys.
Yeah, I can't wait as well. Luke, what is up? Are you looking forward to this crazy DraftKings slate?
Yeah, 100%. To Weezy's point, I think there are a lot of opportunities to be different. I think 2/3 of the entire card is projected to end inside the distance. Even the ones that aren't are like very slight to go the distance. So I think it's going to be definitely very volatile in that capacity. So should be a fun one.
Again, AJ, what is up with you? And are you looking forward to this card?
Oh, hell yeah, man. This is going to be a tremendous pay-per-view event. To my surprise, there was a tie for first place in the big GPP last week, despite all these fights. Goes to show that it's just very, very hard to predict, especially when we had a card not too long ago have 8 or 9 fights and then somebody won it solo. So to Luke and Weezy and yourself, it is a higher variance card. I do think there's some chance here that we could see somebody take it down solo. A lot of big score potential, just a lot of fighters that have that sort of high DraftKings point potential in their arsenal. And then, like Luke mentioned, a lot of fights that end inside the distance. There's a lot of fighters with not a lot of game log history. So I think that creates for an opportunity to be contrarian. We have done our homework on them. We do know how they fight. And with no reference points to the average player, I think that there's definitely an edge on this card.
Yeah, you mentioned the big scores, and last week we had some crazy big scores. I had a lineup with like 738 DraftKings points. It was the second best lineup available, and any other week, that's an easy takedown. But it was just a crazy week last week. I do expect some big scores this week as well. Before we get starting into it, if you all can hit the like button, let's get those likes up. Also subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio so you do not miss out on all the other content the guys do throughout the week. Just hit 10K subscribers on Pub Sports as well. So thank you guys all much for so much for all of that. Do you want to shout out the chat real quick? Palama, I need my picks. We will give you some picks. Hope all of you are good. Let's go. Let's go, Palama. David in the chat as well. Let's go. And then Tristan hanging out. Thank you guys so much for hanging out on a Tuesday. And I say we get right into it. And let's start, as always, with the fight target. So, Luke, what is your fight target for UFC 266?
There's definitely quite a few ones that's touched on. A lot of fights projected to end inside the distance, but maybe, I guess, in the event to potentially go a little different here, I am going with Maximov and Roberson. It's only the sixth best ITD line on the entire slate, but because of Maximov coming in, making his debut, I think this fight might get a little less ownership than some others on the card with it being stacked. I think the fight in general is just relatively binary in my eyes. I think, Maximov is a really solid submission grappler, brown belt, submitted a lot of black belts. We've seen Roberson subbed in his last 4 UFC losses. Only stuffs takedowns at roughly 45% as well. So I think opportunities for takedowns are going to be there for Nick Maximov, and he's very dangerous. But also, when we've seen him at space, it hasn't looked particularly great. And obviously, Roberson comes from a kickboxing background as well. I know he hasn't, exactly been knocking out a ton of guys, and has been actually scoring quite a few submissions as well. But I do think the levels on the ground here, the levels on the ground here are different. And I do think the levels on the feet are very different as well. So like I said, I think it's kind of Roberson KO, Maximov sub, and I think it's just a way to be potentially different on this card, and I want exposure to both sides.
Yeah, that's a very interesting fight, right? Roberson 8,200 and Maximov 8,000. I do have a lot of interest in that fight as well myself. Weezy, what is your favorite fight to target for UFC 266?
It's my favorite fight on the card. It's Uros Medic versus the Tarantula Jalen Turner. I can't wait for this fight, dude. Both of these guys have 100% finish rate in their wins. Uros Medic so far in 2 fights, including the Contender Series fight, is averaging 16.92 DraftKings points per minute. And Turner, in his own right, in a much bigger sample size, is scoring 4.32 DraftKings points per minute. We got the 4th best inside the distance line on this fight. I mean, frankly, I think that this is one of the safest bets on the entire card in a card that's just chock full of favorites that are big, wide lines. Is the fight doesn't go to decision for Turner and Medic. Both of these guys are just incredibly explosive and, somewhat inexperienced as well. So I just see one of these guys getting finished. They're both in that mid-range as well, which means that if you're rostering these guys, it'll help you be able to go up and get some of these guys in the 9,000 range as well. So Medic Turner is definitely the one that I'm going to be targeting.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Weezy. That is my favorite fight to target as well. I can honestly see myself, I know it's a 14-fight card, but most of my lineups are going to have this fight. 8,400 for Medic and 7,800 for Turner. I really would be surprised, as you would, and most people would, if this fight saw the scorecards, like you mentioned, both guys 100% finish rate. Medic has never been over the 1.5 round mark. I think he's been to the second round once, and in that second round, he finished that fight in the first minute of that second round. So, Medic, in his last 2 fights especially, he's coming out and just dominating these guys, going very fast, a very hectic pace as well, and he's able to run through some guys so far, but I'm not so sure he's going to be able to run through Turner. It's definitely possible, and I'm curious to see what happens if it does get into the second round and past that 1.5 round mark. I think at that point it probably does favor Turner, but we really don't know because we've never seen Medic that far in the fight. But I honestly don't think we're going to have to worry about Medic into the later rounds because I don't see it getting past that 1.5 round mark. I think this is going to be an early stoppage on either side. Both guys are very, very dangerous. Turner's very dangerous on the feet and on the mat as well. And like you, Weezy, this is going to be one of my favorite fights on the entire card, and I'm going to have it in the majority of my lineups. I think someone's getting finished. I think that fight doesn't go prop is very safe as well. But yeah, it's a fight I'm going to probably my second highest exposed fight behind the main event, and it's something I'm really looking forward to watch as a fan as well. We have a dono, Paluk, saying, has anybody heard about Helen Yee interview with Josh Thompson about the Nick Diaz training footage? Anybody?
I have not. I'm interested to hear what that's all about.
Yeah, Paluk, if you can kind of explain that in the comments, we'll bring it up and talk about it a little bit. But yeah, thank you for the dono and thank you for hanging out, Paluk. And AJ, what is your fight to target for this week?
Yeah, I'll compete the trifecta with you guys, Turner and Medic. I do think that's the best fight to target on the card, and it's one of those things I feel like regardless of how much people talk it up, it just won't get the ownership it deserves. Piggybacking off your guys' point, Turner himself has not been the distance in the vast majority of his fights. 15 professional fights, all but 2 of them have been to the scorecard. So I do think that it's a Medic early or Turner late sort of scenario, or even Turner early. I think that's well within reason. An interesting thing about Medic is he's a very long and rangy guy for this weight class, but he's used to being the longer, rangier guy. And now that he's not against Turner, I'm interested to see how that plays out. Turner's got a couple inches of a height and about 6 inches of reach. Turner doesn't defend strikes the best, 45%, absorbs north of 4 significant strikes per minute. To my surprise, even though the fight itself told a different story, he was actually outstruck at distance by Brock Weaver. A bit of a concern because Weaver isn't a great striker. So I definitely do see some finishing potential here. The concern with maybe Turner maybe not winning is, I do think he's got a grappling advantage for sure, but we just don't see of him as a wrestler. He's only landed, 2 takedowns in his UFC stats sample size. So I do think that there's potentially knockout upside here for both guys. I'm interested to see how Medic's gas tank holds up should he get extended, because like you guys said, he really hasn't been past the 6-minute threshold beyond the second round. And how many guys have we seen throughout history haven't been past a certain point, and then we find out that they have bad cardio? It's more often than not. So I'm very interested in this fight's finishing potential from a DraftKings perspective.
There we go. And like Luke said earlier, there are so many fights on this card that we should be targeting. And any other fights stick out to you guys?
Like the one you guys touched on was the close second for me, but I figured at least 1 or 2 of you guys was going to say that one, so I wanted to be a little different with my selection. But yeah,
the Blaydes Rozenstruik fight. I mean, either Blaydes wrestle fucks him for 3 rounds and piles up maybe 10 or 12 takedowns, or Rozenstruik finds that chin and sleeps him. Either whoever wins that fight's probably going to score a ton of points. even Daukaus Abdurakhimov. You know, there's a lot of fights on this card to target. The hard one is the next one, which is the fight to fade. That's the hard one.
Yeah, I agree with that. Clint is in the chat. What is up, Clint? Hanging out. Clint just has recently had access to DraftKings, so I have been noticing him in the chat every Tuesday. Thank you for hanging out, Clint. Paluk saying Thompson alludes to a private video that he viewed from someone's phone and that he hopes that Diaz can make the fight. Would not elaborate on details. Interesting. Don Max saying Medic Alaska FC in the then 2 trash cans. I still don't know how legit he is, and that's same with me, Don Mac. I don't know how good he is, but we're going to find out if he can pass this test against Turner. Banana saying, are you watching the Dana White's Contender Series? I'm sure all 4 of us will be doing so. That does start in about 49 minutes. Headley One saying Shevchenko TKO prop. We'll talk about Shevchenko pretty soon, I'm assuming. But let's move on. We do have about 50 in here. If y'all can hit the like button, let's get those likes up. Thank you for hanging out on a Tuesday. We are now going to get into our fight to fade. And like Weezy said, this was tough. This was very tough. I think a lot of these fights, it's a 14-fight slate. A lot of these fights are definitely in play. A lot of these fighters are in play. But Weezy, we'll start with you. What is your fight to fade for this card?
Yeah, and like I said, it was a difficult decision. I'm going to have, I mean, if I enter 150 lineups, I'm not fading any of these fights because there's upside for a lot of these fighters, but for this purpose, I'm going to say Santos Mata Ferry. We've got the lowest fight doesn't go to decision line on the card. So when you're unlikely to finish on a 14-fight slate, it's very hard to picture a fighter that wins by decision unless it's a huge underdog, finding the optimal lineup. So, I would say that, Mata Ferry actually has a better chance to be optimal here than Santos does, because Mata Ferry is very difficult to finish. So yeah, unless Roxy pulls off an upset here, I would just stay away from this one altogether. There are so many compelling fighters up there in that 9,000 range. I just don't think Santos is one of them this week. And because I think that Santos probably wins this fight 9 out of 10 times at this point, it's hard for me to back Roxy as well. So yeah, I'm going to be staying away from that one.
Sounds good. Luke, what is your fight to fade?
Obviously, with Weezy's point, that was kind of my main one too. But once again, in an effort to be contrarian, I'm actually going with the big boys here in Daukaus and Abdurakhimov. It does have the 4th best ITD line on the whole slate, but with it being heavyweight, I do think it's going to be a fight that's heavily targeted to give you contrarian opportunities. Obviously, Daukaus has been coming out here and icing the large majority of guys that he's fighting. But Shamil's a pretty tough dude, Pakistan. He has been finished in all 3 of his losses, but the common theme with all those have all came who's looking to stand. And so I just don't really see him attempting a lot of takedowns here. He could obviously knock out Shamil, but Shamil also defends strikes at roughly 58% to boot. So I think that's pretty decent for heavyweight. And I actually, my quasi-contrarian take is I do think this fight actually does hit the card. So definitely going to be sweating this one a little bit, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to be more on the Daukaus side in that fight. Not too much interest in Shamil for me. We have a dono in the chat. Don't ask, don't tail with the $10 dono. Great stuff, guys. We be pubbing. Thank you. Don't ask, don't tail for hanging out every week, and thank you so much for the dono. We also have Connor Max in the chat. Connor Mack in the chat as well. Thanks for the dono. Don't ask, hit the like button. I agree. Lots of great knowledge here. Appreciate that, Connor Mack. Thank you for hanging out as well. And then AJ, what is your fight to fade for this week?
I'm going to agree with Uncle Weezy here. I'm going to go with the Santos versus Mata Ferry fight. We look at Mata Ferry's chances of winning this fight. They're rough low. I think she's okay as a cash punt, but for GPP's sake, I'm just not all that interested. If I was playing Mata Ferry, I'd be more so buying into the narrative that fight that Santos had in her UFC debut with Barella was not a one-off. That is a true representation of her defensive grappling. And I do sort of subscribe to the narrative that she was just, nervous UFC debut, because she just looks so much better in the following 2 fights. She's a much better striker than Roxanne, also probably a more physical and athletic grappler. So even though she's not a better technical grappler than Mata Ferry, like from a profile perspective, I do think that she could out-grapple her due to those physical and athletic advantages, similar to how she did against Jillian Robertson. Roxy actually defends takedowns at a rate of 30%, so I'm not even putting it past Santos to get some takedowns in control. But even with that said, she's very, very expensive. And like you guys alluded to, not a good chance of winning inside the distance. And she's not very active from the top position, so it would mostly be some control. Roxy's very durable, so I just don't think I'd be investing in a high upside scenario if I were to play that fight.
Yep, and fair for me. We're going to do the trifecta once again. I'm going to be fading Santos Mata Ferry for the most part. I actually don't hate Santos. It's just there's so many great plays up in this 9K range. It's like almost impossible for me to get there. Guys like Merab, or girls like Shevchenko, Andrade is up there, Blaydes is up there. Fighters like that. Semmelsberger's up there as well. So she's probably my least favorite out of the bunch. But yeah, I'm with you, AJ. I also think that she can exploit the 30% takedown defense of Roxanne. She was able to control Jillian Robertson for about 15 minutes in that fight. I think she could do that, or just make it simple, stuff the takedowns of Roxy, keep it on the feet, and outstrike her for 15 minutes. And if she does that route, it's not going to score as well as like a Blaydes or a Shevchenko or fighters like that. So for me, it's pretty easy fade there. Moving on to the fade of the week, and we'll go with Luke. Who's your favorite fade for this week?
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of piggybacking off you guys. I'm going Taila Santos at 9.3K. She has the worst ITD line of any fighter in the 9K range at sub 30% implied probability. Her fights have hit the cards in her last 4 outings. I know she was a perennial finisher back on the regional scene, but we kind of see a common theme with that, not only on the Brazilian regional scene, but just in general on the regional scene. Fighters who are primary finishers, they come into the UFC and it just tends not to translate when they're starting to fight steps up in competition. So I think that needs to be noted. She scored decent in all of her wins, but at a 9.3 price tag, I just don't think she can 10x here with as much finishing potential up at that 9K range, coupled with even, some fighters in that, higher mid, even to lower tier 8K range, who I think can definitely outscore her as well. And because we have a 15 or 14 fight slate, you have a lot of options to choose from. It's just extremely hard to prioritize Taila Santos in this spot as well, coupled with, the general card, 2 out of 2/3 of the card being projected and inside the distance, whereas this fight is not 2. So I am looking to fade Taila Santos at 9.3K.
Yep, I don't hate that. I almost picked her as well. I'm going to take the safe route and go with Lauren Murphy here at 6,700. I just really don't see a path to victory for Murphy here. I think Shevchenko is going to not only win, but dominate her in this fight, probably finish her as well. 6,700, easy fade for me. Don't really see myself having much, if any at all, of Lauren Murphy. Pretty easy fade in my opinion. If you want to get really different, maybe play a couple of her, but it's just really hard to see like a minus 2,000 on some books favorite in Shevchenko. Losing this one. Weezy, what is your fade of the week?
So I'm going to be fading Omar Morales this week, and I know that's not going to be a popular one, but I don't see a lot of finishing upside from Morales, even though Pierce is actually really sloppy and hittable. I do see Omar spending the majority of this fight fending off takedown attempts, leaving him unable to pressure Pierce for fear of him shooting reactive double legs. Pierce's conditioning and pace and volume is absolutely terrifying. I don't think Morales has ever seen somebody like Pierce. Morales is the one that's used to being the one that's pressuring, and he's got very good conditioning in his own right. But I heard an interview with Jonathan Pierce today, and I very, very rarely listen to interviews. I don't care what fighters say. I'm really more worried about their past performances and what they've done in the cage. But when Lynch asked Pierce how he thought the fight was going to go, he said, "I've never seen a striker out wrestle a wrestler." And boy, you got to love to hear that if you're on the Pierce side, because if this guy's out there wrestling, he's going to take Morales's conditioning way faster than any of his other opponents have. He's going to make him extremely uncomfortable. And if he drags Morales into that deep water and starts putting that volume on him, I could see him scoring a ton of points and getting a late finish. So I am going to go with Omar Morales as the guy to fade, because I don't think he's going to be comfortable here. I don't think he's going to be allowed to be at his best and he's at his best when he's pressuring and he's striking. Even if he does have success, he won't be scoring any points grappling, and I think it'll be difficult for him to pay off that $8,500 salary unless he gets a finish early, and Morales is not known for being a finisher. So yeah, fading Morales.
Yeah, that stuck out to me as well. Morales, I think he could potentially get a finish with, like you said, how sloppy and how hittable Jonathan Pierce is. But you take a look at it, he only has 2 knockouts on his entire record. So definitely probably contrarian one. I do think Morales will gain some ownership, but I can see it. If he does not finish Pierce early, I don't think it's going to be optimal. Tristan, Laura Murphy has never been finished. No, she has not, but she's never fought Valentina or anyone remotely close to her. So AJ, who are you looking to fade this week?
Yeah, it was a perfect segue with that comment in there. I'm going to go with Laura Murphy, same play as you, Brady. But I think, if I don't want to echo the same point of my fight to fade, I got to go a little bit different. Laura Murphy, just biggest underdog on the card. Valentina Shevchenko defends significant strikes. She absorbs them less rather than 2 per minute, north of 60% striking defense. Valentina Shevchenko is the best technical fighter in the UFC, in my opinion. She's just got so few holes in her game that I just, until she faces Amanda Nunes, I'm not really going to think about picking against her, or even really, to be honest, think that any of these fights will be competitive. Just absolutely, demolishing Jéssica Andrade last fight, the second best fighter in this weight class that I'm sure we'll get to a bit later. So she's even getting better, which is crazy to think. So when you look at Valentina's, defensive metrics and then just her odds to win, there's just no reason for me to put a lot of money on Lauren Murphy, who's the biggest underdog on the card, regardless if it's in a 5-round fight or not.
Yep, I mean, that performance against Andrade, that shocked me. Like, Andrade is no slouch by any means, and for her to do what she did to Andrade, I was shocked. But yeah, she's an animal for sure. Anything else stick out to you guys in terms of a fade? I know we touched on there. It's hard to find a lot of fades here.
I didn't find many fades on this card. I probably would still own some Morales because I think that he actually could, get a win and finish Pierce, because Pierce has been finished before. He's kind of sloppy, but that's just not the way I see it going. So yeah, it's hard to find fighters to fade on this card. You're really going to have to be exposed to pretty much everybody if you're entering a ton of lineups.
One that sticks out to me, if you don't mind, Robbie Lawler actually is one that I'm interested in being very, very underweight to. Regardless if it's a 5-round fight or not, his power has just regressed so much these years, and his volume and just his performances, just watching him against Neil Magny, just honestly looked totally shot. And that's not me just trying to be mean. I'm just being honest here. He was not very competitive at all. I know that there's a lot of questions on the Nick Diaz side, but on the plus, he hasn't been fighting all this time, which means that he's been taking a lot less damage. And I honestly think there's a legit chance that Nick Diaz just goes out there and outvolumes him and just, wears on Lawler late. So it's just more so like a fade on Robbie Lawler's performances recently. He just looks so regressed, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this is the last time we see him fight.
No, 100%. And that's a very weird fight. I'm curious to see what the ownership is going to be for that fight in general. Robbie Lawler, people know him. Nick Diaz, people are going to be tuning into this card for him more than likely. So I do want to see the ownership on that fight in general. And if it is high, I might be underweight to it as a whole, to be honest. KCOH is saying Valentina by sub is a sneaky play. Gaming Wolf saying first round finish for Bullet. I mean, I really think she can finish in any round she wants. What else do we got? UFC wants Nick Diaz to make more money, potentially. You've got to fade that whole Diaz-Lawler fight. Great call, AJ. Yeah, it's a tough fight to call for sure. We have not seen Diaz in like 6 years. So we will move on, though, to the favorite dog. So favorite dog, I'll start this one off. So I'm going to be a little bit contrarian, I think. My favorite dog is going to be Nick Maximov. So watching tape on this guy, I'm not like overly impressed, but at 8,000, he has the style to go out here and score a ton of DraftKings points. He's a very solid grappler, competes in grappling tournaments outside of MMA. And what I like about Maximov is he sticks to a game plan. And the majority of fights I watched, he shot a takedown with like in the first 10 seconds. And when you think of Carl Roberson, you think of, the bad takedown defense. He's been submitted in all 4 of his losses. And although he's getting submitted by the best of the best guys, I think if Maximov does come out here and win this fight, it's going to be him getting takedowns, a ton of them, control time, and maybe even being the 5th person to submit Roberson. So I'm curious to see what the ownership that Maximov comes in at. And like Luke said, I think it's going to be a very sneaky fight to target where, Maximov, maybe he does implement a wrestling of a game plan. Maybe he wins a dominant decision with that wrestling, finding a submission as well. Or if Roberson is able to stuff the takedowns, keep it on the feet, he probably knocks him out, to be honest. So Maximov is going to be my favorite dog. Technically, I think he's a slight favorite on the money line, but in terms of DraftKings, he is 8K there as a dog. So Weezy, what are you looking at for a dog here?
I'm going to go with Brian Ortega. Ortega actually has a better inside the distance line than Volkanovski, and Volkanovski's the favorite. Even if Ortega loses, we could see him racking up about 2.5 DraftKings points per minute over 25 minutes. If the fight does go to decision, you're talking about 62.5 DraftKings points for a guy that's priced at 7,600. Volkanovski has been really good defensively, though. I think he's only allowing 1.72 DraftKings points per minute, so it's very low, and it's partially a function of the fact that people aren't taking down Volkanovski. So unless you're putting on a ton of volume, just pure striking, it's hard to rack up a lot of DraftKings points. But Ortega is explosive, and there's nobody on this slate with a higher salary than Ortega who has a better inside the distance prop. So you go down pretty far. You've got a 5-round fight here. I think he's a good value at 7,600. And if he does win this fight, it'll probably be inside the distance, because that's the one thing that Ortega really is. He's explosive, and he can finish the fight at any time. He's got a ton of 3rd-round finishes on his resume. And then, the fact that it's 5 rounds, the fact that it's really kind of hard to find value below around 7,800 on this roster anyway. I think that Ortega is a great choice for a dog this week.
No, I agree, Weezy. I mean, like you mentioned, there's not much down there in the low 7,000 range, but Ortega is definitely somebody that sticks out. You got a 5-round fight. If he does win, it is probably going to be a finish. And I think the main event as a whole is going to be something to definitely target. You have 8,600 for Volkanovski, 7,600 for Ortega in a 5-round fight. Like, it's really hard to see the fighter that wins that fight not on the optimal lineup. So it probably will be my highest exposed fight on the entire card. AJ, what is your favorite dog on the card?
So I'm going to have exposure to a few different dogs. I'm going to concentrate on a select few. And this is the guy that I want to drop like the lowest to, where I want to fit in that category. And that's Nasrat Haqparast at 7,500. He's more of like a knockout or bust type of guy in terms of if you want to look for 100 points out of him, but he does have a legitimate chance to win this fight per the betting odds. Plus 125 I'm looking at. He's also getting bet up. I know that there's some weird circumstances with this fight about it maybe not happening with like the visa issues and whatnot, but I'm assuming it's happening. And I'm assuming that Nasrat, if he just, takes hooker shots and closes distance, could, win. I think he's the better pocket boxer. I think he's more technical. I think he's better with his defense, specifically with blocking with his hands. The kicking range should favor Hooker, but Hooker's coming off of a fight against Michael Chandler. It was the first time he was knocked out professionally with like one big shot to the head. And, you just never know how that's going to affect fighters, that have historically been very durable, and then they get put out once for the first time. It's more so narrative-y than anything, but I don't expect Nasrat to be very popular based on his history. I do think he's got a legit chance to win. He doesn't have to worry about defending takedowns here theoretically, and he is a very talented prospect that gets better on a fight-to-fight basis. So Nasrat Haqparast has win equity, and I do think he has some sneaky knockout upside as well.
Yeah, we do see that line is closing up as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of line value on Nasrat Haqparast, especially as we get closer to fight time. And like you said, hopefully this fight happens. There's a lot of things going on outside of the cage, but I hope both of them do make it to the cage on Saturday. And then Luke, who is your favorite dog for this week?
I'm going Jalen Turner at 7.8K. He's got one of the best ITD lines. The fight's roughly pick 'em. I should say one of the best ITD lines below 8K. Obviously a very volatile selection. Medic could very well come in here and KO him, but in reality, there just is so many unknowns on Medic, knocking out a bunch of guys on the Alaskan regional scene. He just knocked out 2 grapplers, fighting the biggest guy he's fought and a guy who has a perceived wrestling and grappling edge on paper. Turner is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. We have seen Medic taken down multiple times, controlled multiple times by much less caliber guys of Jalen Turner. So once again, it's hard to really have a favorite dog of the week, but I guess my more so take of why I'm putting him in this category is because I feel like he has gigantic favorite upside in, despite him, not winning decisions historically, he actually is more proven in more extended fights in terms of general minute winning ability too. So for that reason, I like Turner at 7.8K just because his upside is so high in a win.
Yep, solid dog there with some upside. Anything else stick out to you guys that we did not talk about? All right. We do have about 70 in here. If you all can hit the like button, we're about to get to our favorite GPP play. And when we talk GPP, we are looking for a high upside, high ceiling fighter. And I guess I'll kick this one off. For me, it's going to be Curtis Blaydes at 9,200. On paper, Rozenstruik has a pretty solid takedown defense. I'll look at the exact number here. He has an 80% takedown defense, but only 3 fighters have attempted to take him down, and they're all successful in doing so. Overeem was able to take him down a few times. Gon was able to take him down, and then also Junior Albini was able to take him down. And going back to the Albini fight, Albini was able to get him down easily, get right into mount. If Curtis Blaydes takes Rozenstruik down, I think he's going to, probably finish him. I mean, I'm still not sold on the takedown defense on Rozenstruik. I'm not sold on the get-up game. Even in the Overeem fight, when Overeem got him down, Rozenstruik showed that he didn't have much of a ground game, not much of a get-up game as well. And I think if Curtis Blaydes is get him down, which he will, Curtis Blaydes is a better wrestler than all 3 of those guys. I think he's going to, get him out of there, and probably early as well. So I like Curtis Blaydes. I like the wrestling upside, multiple takedowns, control time, and then probably either a first or second round finish. But of course, this is a heavyweight fight. Rozenstruik has a ton of power. Maybe he does catch him on the way in. But I think if Curtis Blaydes fights smart, goes to his wrestling very early, I think he has a very good chance of winning this fight. So I do like Curtis Blaydes in terms of a tournament play at 9,200. Luke, what is your favorite GPP play for this week?
I'm going to go right back with you. Brady, I'm going Curtis Blaydes 9.2. He scores 5.26 DraftKings points per minute and is actually the best wrestler in the history of the UFC if you're actually just looking at pure base stats. He's in control positions for over 50% of his fights and has eclipsed the 100-plus point mark in every fight. He's been able to secure at least 1 takedown. He's also got the 4th best ITD line on the entire slate, coupled with Roz, despite it being heavyweight, actually having the fourth worst inside the distance line on the slate. I know some people might reference that Roz stuffs takedowns at 80%, but he has not faced the caliber of wrestler of a Curtis Blaydes in the past. From a general stylistic perspective, it's kickboxer versus wrestler. And, with Blaydes kind of coming off that KO loss to Lewis, where he only shot 2 takedowns, I think the dude's going to get back to his base here and jump on those takedowns early. And not to mention even what we have seen from Rozenstruik on bottom in the UFC. Even go back to his fight back in the day in Ryzen with Kovalev. Probably should have lost that fight, was largely out-wrestled there. Got taken down multiple times by Junior Albini, controlled early on in his UFC career too. So I just think the levels on the ground here are so much different. And if Blaydes wants to open up on the ground, he can definitely finish him. But he's another guy who doesn't necessarily need a finish win to 10x with just the number of takedowns, control time, and potential ground and pound he can land too. So I do think there are other couple honorable mentions with Semmelsberger and Volkanovski as well. But Curtis Blaydes at 9.2, I think could be interesting. And just based on ownership, I don't know if it could potentially be a pivot play if people are scared to play Blaydes after the last outing. So he might get less ownership. I can't say that definitively, but we'll see. At 9.2, I like him.
I'm with you there. Weezy, what is your favorite GPP play for this week?
All right, I'm going with Chris Daukaus this week. I love him for cash lineups too. I think he's just going to cruise in this fight. There's a lot of red flags right now with Shamil Abdurakhimov. He's pulled out of his last 5 fights. He's coming off a punctured lung. He's 40 years old. This is a bad. You got to wait and see something from a 40-year-old guy coming off a punctured lung before you start betting him. And then right now, Chris Daukaus has got the 3rd best inside the distance line on the card, but he's got the 8th highest salary. So you get a lot of savings there for a guy that's got a really good chance of finishing inside the distance. And then if we look at Daukaus's performance so far in the UFC from a DraftKings perspective, in his 3-fight sample size, he's averaging 10.87 DraftKings points a minute. Now think about that. Luke just said that Blaydes, who's kicking ass and taking names, is scoring like 5.26. This guy's scoring 10.87. Obviously there will be regression back to the mean there. He's not going to continue starching hose in the first minute in every single fight. But I just think that this is a bad situation for Abdurakhimov. This is a bad way to get welcomed back after a 2-year layoff, a punctured lung. This should be Daukaus all day. And I feel like he's got a super high upside here. He's scoring a ton of knockdowns, which is the highest scoring thing that you can do in DraftKings. So I'm looking for a first round finish and a knockdown here from Daukaus and maybe over 110 points.
Sounds good. Yeah, his price tag is very intriguing in terms of tournaments, 8,800. He has been winning in the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if he did it again here. AJ, what is your favorite GPP play for this week?
I'm going to go a little bit off the board and Matthew Semmelsberger at 9,400. I think all of his metrics check out, but he's going to go under-owned relative to the other options on the slate because of the familiarity factor. You know, people just trust Valentina Shevchenko much more, who's a much larger favorite in a 5-round fight. You know, Semmelsberger's coming off of a loss against Chaos Williams, but he's facing an opponent here who hasn't fought in over 4 years and it really reminds you of Chris Avilia's chance in the UFC when he fought at UFC 205 or 203 rather, when Nate Diaz was fighting Conor the second time. Like, he knows Nick Diaz, he trains at that camp, and I think a big reason why he's fighting is because Nick is returning and fighting again. To my understanding, he excels as a submission grappler, a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he really struggles to get takedowns from, you know, going back over 4 years ago on film. I've seen him taken down easily. I've seen him just look atrocious on the ground. I've seen him back mounted. I've seen him gas early in fights, you know, struggle to close the distance. Semmelsberger, he's not a great fighter, but I think he's got a significant technical, striking, wrestling, athleticism, and speed advantages here. I think he's a much better fighter everywhere. I think he could win by knockout on the feet. Sano, an interesting nugget that I came across, his one knockout loss came against an opponent who that was his only win by knockout. Semmelsberger could crack. He's also got a reasonable wrestling game, I think, also a reasonable control game on the ground. He understands like concepts, technical concepts like body triangles, despite a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. So I think Semmelsberger's got this fight on the feet. He can win by knockout. He could overwhelm him with volume, lands north of 6 significant strikes per minute. He could land takedowns. He could earn control time and even get a finish on the mat. So I just think this is going to be a total domination by Semmelsberger, just like Shevchenko. But the caveat is he's $100 cheaper, and I think he's going to be much less owned. So I like pivoting over to Semmelsberger in some GPP lineups.
Yep, like you said, it'll probably be like a lot lower owned than Shevchenko, right? You think Semmelsberger can finish as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd suggest that as well. There's a finish properly on one of the books that suggests it.
I like it. Anything else stick out to you guys? We didn't talk about Merab. Any thoughts on Merab?
I think he's a phenomenal play as well. There's like literally 10 options we could pick for this category. But I think we could all see the same thing with Merab. Just a lot of control and wrestling upside. He's got a massive cardio advantage. He's definitely gonna be a guy I want to focus on.
Yeah, if you can find a couple of underdogs that win on this card in that mid 7,000 range, it just feels like everybody that doesn't, lose to the underdogs up top has the potential to score 100 points. I mean, Merab with the wrestling upside. You got Dawkins and Blaydes with the finishing upside. You got Valentina just going to shave ass, plain and simple. And then you got, Semmelsberger fighting a guy who's 0-2-1 in his last 3 and hasn't fought in 5 fucking years. So, there's just so many options up there, man. It's hard to fit them all in, though. It's the tricky part is going to be finding those guys 8,000 and below that can score you some points.
100%. Lots of plays do stick out in that top range for sure. All right, so next we will go to our favorite cash play. I know what the majority of people are going to probably say here. I'm going to start it off, and I'll go with Valentina Shevchenko, 9,500. Like I said, I think I saw her like minus 2,000 on a book. Nice floor, very, very safe. I don't call anybody a lock, but I think she is as close to a lock you can get against Lauren Murphy here. I think Lauren Murphy's luck has just ran out, and I think Shevchenko is going to dominate her. Probably finish her. I don't know when she's going to finish her. It could be early, it could be late, but I think she's going to do pretty much whenever she wants. Again, safe play. I like it in cash. For tournaments, I think you definitely can get away with it. She's going to be very high owned, and there are a ton of other options like a Blaydes, like a Semmelsberger, fighters like that. But in cash, I'm going to take my safe floor, and I'm going to play Valentina Shevchenko. Luke, what is your favorite cash play for this week?
That's obviously the most obvious one, but once again, I figured some people would say that, so I kind of went another route. I'm actually going Merab at 8.9. In his 5 of his 6 UFC wins, he's eclipsed over 100 point, the over 100 point mark. And largely, they have been in decisions as well. So he's another guy that's kind of the exception to the rule who doesn't necessarily need a finish to 10x as well. He scores 5.94 Draftkings points per minute. I think a fun stat as well, he's in control positions for roughly 45% of his fights and only eats 2.22 strikes absorbed per minute. Obviously, Moraes is a step up in competition, I guess meritocratically, but from a stylistic standpoint, I think Moraes is largely predicated on, a W from him is predicated on a round one knockout. I just don't think he has the gas tank. We've even seen that in some extended fights as well, even with Cejudo. Obviously, Cejudo, strong wrestler. He took the first off of Cejudo, but Cejudo also didn't really do much in the first round, where Merab is just reliable to do things on the feet and in terms of pushing the pace in the wrestling. And we've seen Moraes slow as well. So I just think Merab is a great archetype in general to beat Moraes. That's not to say Moraes can't beat him. Obviously is going to be live early, but as this fight gets past 5 minutes, his window to win this fight decreases exponentially as well, coupled with Moraes is inside the distance line, sitting at sub 20%. So I actually do think there is some general safety in Merab. I know some people talk about his defense not being great. I hear that to some perspective, but in general, I think he kind of plays that mid-range outside game well. It's more so him coming in that I'm more concerned about than anything. But in reality, and just based on how his fights are playing, he's not going to give Moraes a range kickboxing match that he needs to succeed. And despite Moraes being a black belt, his wrestling is good enough to nullify Moraes' black belt as well, in my opinion. So I love him at 8.9. Obviously, there's a lot of options you can take for your favorite cash play in that 9K range, but I think he's just really safe this week, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny that Merab is a phenomenal DraftKings play. If he does win, he's going to score a ton of DraftKings points. That's what he does. Weezy, what is your favorite cash play for this week?
Yeah, I'm going with Valentina Shevchenko, and I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag right now. I like her to win this fight, you guys. I'm calling it. I think Valentina Shevchenko wins this fight, so I'm going to put her in my cash lineups. Look, I mean, it's a 5-round fight. She's got the best inside the distance line on the card. She's got the best that fight has the best fight doesn't go to decision line on the card. And Valentina Shevchenko actually has the best first round prop on the card. I mean, it's just everything, minus 2,000 to win the fight. So yeah, it's just a real simple. It's like a free square. And then you're just going to have to find a little bit of value lower down in the salary ranges just because she's the most expensive fighter on the card. But yeah, Valentina wins this fight.
Bold prediction there, Weezy. Bold prediction. AJ, what are you looking at for a cash play here?
Yeah, got to be Valentina Shevchenko as well. Murphy defense takedowns at a rate of 70%, but we know Shevchenko is just on another level with her physicality, with her, specifically her clinch-based takedowns, just so strong in top position. We referenced the Andrade fight where she landed 7 takedowns there against Andrade. She's very physical. Murphy is physical too, also a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but just seeing Valentina, even dominate Caitlin Jukagian on the mat, who's a very good submission grappler, has been competing in competition for years, and then getting a finish from the mounted crucifix position. Shevchenko is just on another level in terms of her technique, her physicality, her top control, and she's just even the much better striker. She could theoretically get a knockout, but Murphy's never been knocked out. Even if it does play out for 5 rounds, I think Shevchenko could rack up a bunch of, strikes, both significant and ground strikes, clinch strikes, and then takedowns and control time. So safest play on the board, and I'm going to boldly, just like Uncle Weezy, pick her to win her fight.
Very bold take. We'll see if it works out on Saturday. All right, moving along to the favorite value play on the slate. We'll stick with you, AJ. Who is your favorite value play for 266?
Yeah, Nicholas Maximov, revisiting him from an earlier subject. I like his odds value, and I just like the stylistic component of he's the type of fighter that Carl Roberson has historically struggled with. I know that he's not nearly as proven as those other guys that I'm referencing, Glover Teixeira, Cesar Ferreira, even Wellington Turman, Roberson struggled with. I know he ended up winning that fight, but he got his back taken there, got taken down 4 times. Maximov trains at the Nick Diaz Academy, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, according to his Instagram. Very, very good submission grappler, actively competes in grappling bouts. Also has a wrestling background too, which is good to see, because we often just see these excellent jiu-jitsu practitioners not necessarily have the wrestling to get takedowns with consistency, but even though I do think that Nick is a work in progress, that's a good thing because he's still young and could get better. And I think that even from the fight footage that I've seen, his wrestling is good enough to get Roberson down, who, as Luke mentioned earlier, only defends takedowns at a rate of 45%. So I think, Maximov is a threat to get takedowns, get top control time, and even get a submission here. So I love Nick Maximov here. I love the odds value, and I just love the stylistic matchup for him.
Yeah, I can't argue that. I'm on Maximov pretty heavy myself this week in terms of DraftKings. Weezy, what are you looking at for your favorite value play for this week?
So I'm going with Jalen Turner, and I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments that Luke spoke about earlier. So Medic has never been past 51 seconds in the second round. So it's really hard for us to know how Uros Medic is going to look if this fight does get out of the first round. Jalen Turner has got the size advantage. He's got the experience advantage. He's got the grappling advantage, and he's got the strength of schedule advantage. But you look at it, and he's the underdog in this fight. And it's because we've seen Uros Medic be so dominant with his striking that he's just starching hose, getting them out of there in the first 2 minutes of the fight. But we know that once you get up to this level, you have that regression back to the mean in terms of being able to finish fights that easily. You see guys like Louis Kosi come in, and Medic has a lot of those Kosi vibes, and that he's just absolutely killing people, but we don't know what he looks like after the first round. So Turner having all those advantages that I just spoke of, and also the fact that he's got a 100% finish rate in his own right. I believe that if Turner wins this fight, he's going to be optimal at 7,800. And I think that's going to be a great value if he does win this fight. But I do see this fight being very close.
Yep, 100%. I can definitely see the winner of that fight in general just being on the optimal lineup. Luke, what is your favorite value play for this week?
Yeah, I'm going with AJ here as well. I'm going Maximov at 8K. I think he's got the best inside the distance line in relation to his general salary of anyone on the entire slate. Obviously, the majority of Maximov-based wins is going to come via wrestling, come via grappling and submissions. Touched on, Roberson's takedown defense, at least in terms of the fight to target being only at 45%. And just multiple fights as well. He's just shown a really bad tendency to give his back. And if you make those poor mistakes against a guy like Nick Maximov, he is going to take advantage of those and he's going to submit you. Not to mention, even in Roberson's last fight against Brendan Allen, he essentially got himself submitted in that fight. He did not need to engage in that leg lock transition, that 50-50 position. He engaged in it. He decided to engage in it. And as a result, he got finished. So not only have I seen just some poor general fight IQ tendencies from Roberson in multiple capacities, I think Maximov is the type of guy to capitalize on those type of mistakes, coupled with AJ's points as well. He's only 8K, making his debut, no game log. I think just the general DFS player is not going to be familiar with who Nick Maximov is. As a result, I feel like he's going to get low ownership, but in a Nick Maximov win, he probably looks minus 300 here and finishes this fight. So I love him as a value play at 8K.
Good points there. For me, my value play is actually going to be Alexander Volkanovski. And this fight in general, you could say that there's value on both these guys, because in a 5-round fight, I really don't see how this fight does not end up on the optimal lineup at these price tags. 8,600 for Volkanovski. You take a look at some of his recent wins. Max Holloway, 102. Holloway, 94. Jose Aldo, 82 in a 3-round fight. Mendez, 101. Elkins, 106. Kennedy, 129. Young, 90. Hirota, 105. When he's winning, he is scoring very, very well. And if he does win this fight, I'd be surprised if he did not, find the optimal lineup at that price tag of 8,600, 5 rounds to work with. If he does win, I'm expecting a lot of output as well. And so I think that's going to be my value play for the week. Anything else sticking out to you guys? All right, so let's get to our last section here in terms of the picks. We have the favorite dart throw, my favorite section of the show. And let's start with Weezy. Who is your dart throw for this week?
Well, it's going to be Nick Maximov for me. And, you guys have already covered a lot of the points that I was going to make about Maximov. Plenty of grappling upside. And since this is his UFC debut, he could be low owned due to the fact that people are not familiar with him yet. Maximov absolutely sells out for the grappling, and Roberson has 45% takedown defense. Even in a decision, I could see Maximov scoring a ton of points if he just stacks takedowns and control time like flapjacks. Carl Roberson has a tattoo on his back that says blessed, and he's been blessed with a lot of things, but fight IQ is not one of them. And so that's the problem with this fight, is that actually, like I just spoke about Jalen Turner, and I find that in this fight, Maximov has a lot of the same disadvantages that Medic has, in that, Roberson's more experienced. Roberson's bigger. Roberson's the way, way, way better striker, and Roberson has fought the way, way better competition. But that massive hole in his game that's fight IQ. That and you had just spoken about how he put himself in that situation, in the leg lock situation against Brendan Allen in just his last fight. And DC was calling that fight, and he just said he put himself there. He said it 3 times. He goes, he put himself there. With less than 20 seconds left in the first round, he put himself in a leg lock position with Brendan Allen, somebody that's a much better grappler than him. The thing that really bugs me about Roberson is he's a fantastic striker, but then if you look at the numbers, over half of his fights are taking place in control time positions. He's not good in control time positions. Nick Maximov is better than him in control time positions, and I think that we're just going to see a repeat of prior Carl Roberson fights where he's not fighting to his win condition. He's not keeping the fight standing and at distance where he'll be at his best. And I think that despite the fact that Nick Maximov has all these deficiencies on paper in comparison to Roberson, that he's just going to take advantage of the fact that Roberson doesn't avoid grappling exchanges. I think Nick will be better there, and I think he can score really well in this fight.
Yeah, I like it. For me, I think I'm going to be pretty contrarian here in my dart throw. It's going to be Marlon Maria, 7,300. And the reason why I think a lot of people are really low on Marlon Maria, and you probably should be. I mean, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, arguably lost against Jose Aldo as well, lost against Henry Cejudo, but look at who he's losing against, right? Rob Font, Corey Sanhagen, and Henry Cejudo, the champion. And it was just 2 years ago when he was, fighting for a title, and now he's, fighting Merab here. Merab's been fighting guys like Cody Stamen, John Dotson, Gustavo Lopez, Casey Kenny, Brad Katona, Terrion Ware. So it's going to be a massive, massive step up for Merab Dvalishvili. And we forget that, Moraes is very, very dangerous. If he's going to win this fight, it's probably going to be a knockout, maybe a submission. We saw Merab submitted before against Ricky Simone at the end of the fight in a couple of years back. And, Moraes, like Luke said, he's a black belt. He's very dangerous on the feet, on the mat as well. And Merab needs to mind his P's and Q's. But on the flip side, like if he does not finish Merab in that first round, we know he's probably going to slow down. He's going to gas out, and Merab's going to take over. But I'm just targeting that first round finish upside because he's a very, very good fighter. But the problem is he's a very good fighter for about a round, and then he does slow down. So my dart throw is going to be Marlon Maria at 7,300. I think he's going to be pretty low owned, as the majority of people will be on the Merab side. Luke, what is your dart throw for this week?
So I might be going out on a bit of a ledge this week, just at least in terms of ownership, because I don't know if he'll be low owned or not. But I'm going Nick Diaz at 7.9K. Maybe he does get more ownership based on name value, but his inside the distance line isn't very good. There are general questions on how he's going to look coming back in this layoff. But historically, he's scored really well in wins, and Lawler is actually the older party here. At 39, and AJ kind of talked about it a little bit. Homeboy's been fighting a lot, and he's taken a decent amount of damage in this time off, where Nick Diaz necessarily hasn't. And I think from just a general stylistic standpoint, I think the pressure in boxing based game of Nick Diaz can give Robbie Lawler a lot of troubles. Once again, this is under the caveat that we see, an older school Nick Diaz, which might not show up, which is why, it's my quote unquote dart throw of the week. But I think he can really put it on Lawler, to be completely honest. He's finished a large majority of his wins as well. And just from a side note and side narrative perspective, these guys did fight back in 2004, and Diaz did KO Lawler. He's only one of 2 fighters to finish Lawler via strikes in 43 pro career fights. And, Lawler's fought some legit homeboys in there too. And I just think from a side narrative perspective too, that, Diaz is the better submission grappler of this fight. We just saw what Neil Magny did to him in the other fight as well. He was able to get to Lawler's back at multiple points as well. Obviously Magny a black belt too, but Diaz is crafty. And I think it's a spot. Once again, it's not something I would load up on. It's a dart throw. But I think Nick Diaz could put Lawler out. I think he could potentially submit Lawler, and even in a decision win, these guys are going to throw down. There's history there. There's some volatility here. I think Nick Diaz at 7.9 is actually a very interesting Draftkings dart throw this week.
Yeah, interesting. AJ, what are you looking at?
Yeah, a little bit different style here, but I will be definitely taking some shots on those guys. I'm going to go a little bit off the board with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I am a little bit hesitant on the Curtis Blaydes side. I will have a lot of exposure to Blaydes, but in a lot of lineups where I don't have exposure to Blaydes, I'll have some Rozenstruik. I just don't see why a lot of people would be targeting him because of his, just odds to win. I think people are just pretty sold on Blaydes as a DraftKings score, even though he's coming off of a knockout. But it was just so perplexing going back on tape and just seeing him not wrestle Lewis with any urgency whatsoever, when that's like the clear game plan on how to beat Lewis. And it should be his clear game plan on how to beat Rozenstruik. But you would think in a main event spot where the winner is getting an interim title fight against Cyril Gane, he would do that. And I don't know if I could trust the IQ of Blaydes. There's even fights in the past where he tries to wrestle and then struggles for whatever reason. He just is a flat outing, like Mikel Omialanchek. That was a few years ago. I do think that Rozenstruik's a better technical striker, and for Blaydes to get those takedowns, he'll have to close the distance, and Rozenstruik will love that because he'll look to counter on the way in. So he's clearly a knockout or bust fighter, but he does have a path of victory with a knockout, and what should be at a low ownership, a cheap price. I'm willing to take a few stabs on Rozenstruik in large field GPPs.
Yep, if he wins, it's probably a knock, and I'm probably early as well. Don't hate that. So now we will get into our lineups for this week, and then after we give our lineups for this week, we'll talk about who won the contest last week between the four of us. So I will start here. So starting up top, I have Curtis Blaydes, 9,200, Merab Dvalishvili, 8,900, Volkanovski, 8,600, Maximov, 8,000, Jonathan Pierce, 7,700. I'm actually going to stack the main event and go with Ortega at 7,600. Luke, what is your lineup for this week?
I'm actually stacking as well too. I thought I was going to be sneaky there, but I'm going Semmelsberger, Merab, Volk, throwing my boy Diaz in there, Ortega, and Haqparast.
There you go. Yeah, I thought it was going to be a different stacking as well. Weezy, what do you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to be going with Shevchenko up top, then Blaydes, then Dawkins, Pierce, Ortega, and then Cynthia Calvillo at 7,200.
And then AJ, what do you got for this week?
I'm going to go with Shevchenko, Blaydes, Dvalishvili, Ortega, Diaz, and Mata Ferry.
Sounds good. So in terms of last week, we'll get to it here. It might be a surprise on who won. It might not be. Fourth place was Luke. Third place was me. And second place was AJ, but AJ actually put up a huge score, 628.89 DraftKings points, had Sarukian, Jackson, Blanchfield, Maness, Arangju, and Ahoyo. Phenomenal lineup there. But Weezy in first place 2 times in a row with 635.1 DraftKings points. A phenomenal lineup himself. Rangju, Harris, Mike Rodriguez, Kudalaba, Anthony Smith, and Armin Sarukian. Weezy, how do you feel you did it 2 times in a row?
I got to thank Mike Rodriguez for a spectacular performance once again. At this point, I've been humble up until this point, but you got to believe that I might be the best DFS MMA player in the entire world at this point. So I figured I'd just brag a little bit so that I could now ensure that I'll have the worst lineup this week and get my ass shaved by all you guys. But yeah, I mean, to be first amongst you guys in 3 out of 4 weeks, I'm really happy with my performance. And anytime I come out ahead of you guys, I know I'm doing a really good job. So I know you guys are all incredibly sharp. So just being on the show with you guys it's an honor for me.
Heck yeah, man. Congrats 2 times in a row. Let's see if you can make it 3, but I hope not. Hopefully another person gets the chance to win. All right, we'll give our fight picks and head out of here. For me, I'm going to go Volkanovski up top. I'm going to go Shevchenko. I'll go Robbie Lawler, Curtis Blaydes, Andrade, Merab Dvalishvili, Dan Hooker, Chris Dawkins, Talos Santos, Manon Fiorot, Carl Roberson, Jalen Turner, and then Matt Semmelsberger, and then Jonathan Pierce. I'll go Omar Morales for the last one there. And then Luke, who do you have for your picks?
All right. I'm going with Volk, Shevchenko, Diaz, Blaydes. I'm actually going to say Calvillo pulls the upset. Merab, Haqparast, Dawkins, Santos, Turner. Thinking about Silva, but I'm going to say Fiorot, Maximov, Semmelsberger, and Morales.
Weezy, what do you got for your picks?
I'm going with Volk, Shevchenko, Lawler, Blaydes, Andrade, Dvalishvili, Hooker, Dawkins, Santos, Uros Medic, Manon Firo, Nick Maximov, Matt Semmelsberger, and Jonathan Pierce, who I am a huge fan of.
And then AJ, what do you got?
Go with Volkanovski, Shevchenko, Diaz, Blaydes, Andrade, Dvalishvili, Haqparast, Dawkins, Santos, Turner, Ferro, Maximov, Semmelsberger, Morales.
Sounds good. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. I do want to shout out the chat once more. Thank you guys for hanging out and participating throughout the night. You guys can leave a like here on Pub Sports Radio. Also subscribe to the channel. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. You can follow Luke, SWR_betting, Uncle Weezy at MMA Weezy, and then AJ at AJ MMA Betting. All three of these guys put out phenomenal content. Go check it out. And I see you in there, Mr. Drail. Shout out to Jen. Thank you for watching, Jen. And we'll see you guys next week, Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Good luck for UFC